Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. Have you ever imagined a primitive world surprising a technologically superior alien cruiser with unforeseen might? Let's get into the story. The XT-97 cruiser shuddered as it breached the planet's upper atmosphere. Commander Velrak hissed in satisfaction at the sensor readings. Habitable, moderate gravity, a biosphere teeming with exploitable resources, and best of all, a weak, localized energy signature indicating a single underdeveloped settlement.
"Scan complete, Commander,"
Shep's subordinate lisped, his thin voice crackling through the bridge comm.
"Target settlement matches established templates for early-stage civilizations."
"Armaments,"
Velrak rumbled, his multifaceted eyes fixed on the schematic of the unsuspecting human colony.
"Primarily kinetic projectile weaponry, Commander. Large, bulky platforms, low velocity, easily diffused by standard shielding."
A dismissive trill escaped Lisk's mandibles.
"A pathetic display by any advanced species."
Velrak curled a thin, rigid tentacle in agreement. These primitive creatures wouldn't know what hit them. Even their distress signals would never reach another star system before the XT-97 completed its civilizing mission.
"Hail them, Lisk,"
the commander ordered.
"Let them understand the futility of resistance."
Lisk chirped and began tapping into the universal translator matrix. A moment later, a booming synthesized voice echoed across the human settlement's crude comm frequencies. "Attention, primitives of this world. You stand in violation of the Gilles Expansive Compact. Surrender your settlement, and you may be spared extermination." The human response was slow. Then, to Valrak's irritation, it crackled faintly over the comm line as a burst of laughter.
"You hear that, Rusty?"
A gruff, accented voice echoed.
"They want us to surrender."
Another voice, younger, tinged with awe, replied,
"I'm patching visuals through to the bridge now, Commander."
On the main screen, the image resolved, a grizzled human, a crude datapad in his hands, standing amidst what appeared to be the settlement's command center. Another human crouched beside him, adjusting lenses on a bulky optical device.
"Hold on, you pompous bastards,"
the grizzled human drawled into his primitive comm device.
"Let me get a good look at you."
The screen flickered again, this time resolving into a warped, fish-eyed view of the XT-97. Commander Velrak reflexively curled a tentacle in disgust. These primates were even more aesthetically displeasing up close.
Rusty, get me a munitions readout on those, things,"
the gruff human barked.
"Targeting solutions locked on all visible hostiles,"
a new voice replied, crisp and far too calm for someone facing imminent annexation. Velrak straightened, antennae twitching in a mixture of amusement and mild affront.
"This creature dares threaten us. Open the channel, Lisk. I shall enlighten it on the true meaning of power."
His words echoed across the human command center, delivered in a synthesized approximation of their barbaric tongue. "Your defiance is noted and deemed futile. Our energy shields render your crude projectile weapons obsolete. This conflict has but one logical outcome."
Yeah, we get it, yeah."
The grizzled human interrupted with a dismissive wave of his hand.
"Big guns, fancy shields, blah, blah, blah. How about this? You fire first. Let's see how obsolete these guns really are."
Velrak chittered in genuine laughter. Lisk mirrored his mirth. Had these creatures gone truly mad in the face of overwhelming force?
"So be it,"
Velrak boomed.
"Prepare a low-intensity pulse. Disable their primary structure."
A wave of his tentacle sent Lisk scurrying to the weapon controls. A focused energy beam shimmered to life at the bow of the XT-97, a brilliant lance of emerald green that slashed towards the heart of the human settlement. It struck their main command building squarely and did nothing. The humans watched the coruscating energy field shimmer and dissipate against the crude, blocky structure. Commander Velrak blinked all 6 of his eyes, unsure if his visual receptors had malfunctioned.
Commander?
Lisk's voice was a thin chirp of confusion.
The shielding appears, inert. No energy transfer of any kind.
Impossible!
Velrak's bellow echoed across the XT-97 bridge.
Cycle the emitters! Increase the power amplitude!
Again, the crackling green bolt lanced forth. Again, the results failed to match expectations. No scorching blast marks, no overloading circuits, not even a flicker of the human's crude lights. On the main view screen, the grizzled human let out a low, humorous chuckle. His weathered face tightened into a scowl.
All right, boys, he barked. Let 'em know why you don't bring a pea shooter to a railgun fight.
Hi, sorry to interrupt the story, but a lot of you who are listening right now aren't actually subscribed. It's completely free and allows our stories to pop up on your feed much more often. If you're enjoying the story, please consider clicking the subscribe button underneath the video right now. Back to the story. The younger human beside him, the one who had controlled the optical feed, grinned wildly.
Oh, with pleasure, sir!
His fingers flew over a chipped, worn control panel with practiced ease. Commander Velrak opened a comm channel, intending to bellow an enraged threat, when an odd droning sound cut through the bridge. It rose rapidly in pitch, an ear-splitting whine that seemed to shake the very hull of the XT-97. He glanced wildly around, searching for the source, just in time to see a glint of light streaking toward the cruiser. Velrak's eyes widened. The primitive projectile was impossibly fast, a blinding speck against the dark veil of space. It struck squarely. The strike was utterly soundless, the impact visible only as a momentary distortion in the cruiser's shimmering energy shields. Then, the distortion bloomed outward. The flawless integrity of the shield collapsed, warping inwards. For the briefest second, it seemed as if the very fabric of reality buckled before a yawning hole erupted in the hull of the XT-97. The bridge erupted into chaos. Alarms shrieked in dissonant tones, and flashing lights painted the crew consoles in a riot of crimson and amber. Consoles exploded, showering Lisk and the other Gilles crew with debris. Velrak himself was thrown from his command chair, tumbling across the tilting deck. Miraculously, the ship held together. Secondary systems kicked in, sealing breaches, desperately rerouting power. Velrak scrambled to his feet, a hiss of pain escaping him as one of his tentacles scraped against exposed sparking circuitry.
Damn it, report!
He roared, cutting through the din of alarms and panic cries.
Primary shield generator offline!
Lisk chirped, his voice edged into a panicked trill.
Massive hull breach on decks 3 and 4! Life support failing in multiple sections!
Another blinding speck flashed in the viewports. This time it punched straight through the aft auxiliary engine pod, the projectile emerging in a shower of vaporized metal and shredded circuits. The XT-97 shuddered, the rear section erupting in a brilliant flare of exploding plasma.
Commander?
The younger human's voice filtered through the comms, laced with an odd mix of awe and excitement.
That was a tungsten slug at 10% of light speed! How's it taste?
Velrak stared in horror at the dissipating debris field, once a vital part of his pristine cruiser. Their intelligence had been fatally flawed. These weren't bulky platforms or low-velocity weapons. Each was a planet killer in miniature.
Evasive maneuvers!
He snarled, pushing past a cluster of terrified crew members.
Return fire! Target their weapons emplacements!
The XT-97 lurched violently as its remaining engines desperately pushed it into a chaotic, corkscrewing, evasive pattern. Weapon systems flickered back online, targeting arrays desperately locking onto the rapidly shifting positions of the human weapons below. In response, the humans fired again. This time the projectile was smaller, faster, an impossibly thin sliver of light against the blackness of space. It arced erratically, skipping and spinning in defiance of conventional physics before punching through the XT-97's central sensor array.
Blind!
Lisk shrieked, his voice a discordant mix of terror and despair. "Primary targeting systems offline!" Velrak's heart pounded sickeningly with each report of further damage. These primitives possess the power to obliterate starships from across a solar system, their projectiles striking with the force of rogue asteroids. The Gilles' vaunted superiority felt comically thin in the face of such raw, destructive potential.
"Concentrate secondary batteries! Overwhelm their point defenses!"
Velrak commanded, his voice a rasping bellow. A barrage of crackling green energy bolts lanced forth from what remained of the X-T-97's arsenal, targeting a cluster of boxy structures surrounding the human command center. The humans must have guessed their intent, for a desperate chatter filled their comm frequencies. But their countermeasures were pathetic. Net-like objects, small and dim, were hurled before the incoming fire. The crackling energy washed over them, vaporizing them instantly, except they achieved their aim. Each dissipated in a cloud of chaff or some other substance, momentarily obscuring energy signatures and scattering Gilles targeting solutions. By the time the beams found their targets, it was too late. Another flicker of impossibly fast light, and the X-T-97 screamed again as another engine pod burst apart. The cruiser shuddered, yawing sluggishly. Now, its fate was sealed. Panic swelled and consumed the bridge. Crew members fought, shoved, and trampled one another as they sought escape pods. Yet within the maelstrom, Velrak felt a strange surge of clarity. This was no calculated retreat, no organized battle plan. It was a rout, a slaughter. The Gilles expansive compact, the glorious vision of interstellar dominion, lay in tatters, defeated not by superior strategy, but by the primitive savagery of these apes. In the final moments, the grizzled human's gruff voice returned to the comm, tinged with the faintest hint of pity.
All right. Listen, alien. I don't know who you are or why you showed up spouting threats, but this is a bad day for you. Pull back now, and maybe, just maybe, we can chalk this up to a misunderstanding.
Velrak wanted to bellow defiance, threats, anything to salvage the last fragments of his pride. Yet no words emerged. He can only stare at the viewports as another railgun spat its payload of death, the projectile burning ever closer with impossible swiftness. "Incoming on port forward! I can't shake target lock!" The terror had fully overtaken the young technician's voice now. A flicker of movement caught Velrak's attention. The grizzled human, the leader, stood alone amid the chaos of his command center. With a sigh that carried over the comms, he tossed his primitive datapad aside and stood straight, facing the main viewport as if awaiting the inevitable. Then the light swallowed it all. The viewport, the grizzled human, the remains of the human settlement. In that blinding flash, Commander Velrak realized a profound truth. The Gilles were not conquerors, merely the latest in a long lineage of fools stumbling blindly into a galaxy far more dangerous than they could ever comprehend. When the light had faded, the X-T-97 was no longer a warship, but a drifting, crippled hulk. Its once gleaming hull was pockmarked and scorched, vital systems flickering and failing. What remained of Commander Velrak's crew huddled in the few still functional escape pods, their eyes wide with shock and fear. Velrak stood amidst them, his pride fully shattered. Here, at the backwater edge of the galaxy, the Gilles' dreams of expansion were not merely thwarted, but rendered utterly laughable. Below, the planet seemed unchanged. No grand explosion, no world-shattering impact, just the quiet hum of a human settlement picking up the pieces of an unexpected encounter. A chirp from the escape pod's primitive comm system broke his reverie. It was the gruff voice again, weary and strained.
You still up there, alien? We'll hold off on finishing the job long as you folk get out of our system and don't come back.
Velrak, once an emblem of Gilles arrogance, managed a single croaking word in response.
Acknowledged.
He initiated the pod's launch sequence. The XT-97, his command, dwindled rapidly away. His last image was not of victorious humans celebrating amidst wreckage, nor was it of the vast, unexplored reaches of the galaxy ripe for opportunistic conquest. Instead, it was the bulky form of a human railgun, its ungainly barrel stark against the blue marble of the planet, an unyielding sentinel promising swift annihilation to any who might underestimate the primitive creatures below ever again. As his pod hurtled away, Commander Velrak knew the Gilles would not report this encounter. To do so would invite ridicule, or worse, a preemptive strike from other civilizations who understood the true terror humanity possessed. Perhaps in time, the galaxy would learn of the guns that laughed at energy shields. But for now, the secret would remain with the survivors of the XT-97 and the colonists guarding their backwater world. And Commander Velrak wondered just how long that secret could be kept. Cautious observation mixed with a slow grind of bureaucracy followed. The crippled escape pods returned to the Gilles homeworld bearing survivors who spoke little and less often about their humiliating defeat. Initially dismissed as an isolated freak incident, a stroke of terrible luck, the encounter began to gnaw at the edges of the Gilles expansive compact. Whispers started in corridors of power, seeding doubt about the true extent of the Gilles' technological supremacy. After all, who knew what other monstrosities might lurk in the galactic wilderness? A quiet, collective reluctance to explore further afield took root. Instead, efforts focused on fortifying existing territories, perfecting energy shielding techniques, and developing countermeasures specifically designed to defeat hypervelocity projectiles. The humans were none the wiser. Their long-range sensors detected the shift in Gilles activity, but they lacked the context to understand the profound fear they'd instilled. Life on the colony continued much as it had before, punctuated by the occasional launch of a colossal railgun round into deep space, a routine test, or perhaps a silent reminder to whatever might be watching. Meanwhile, Commander Velrak became a pariah of sorts. He'd risen high in Gilles' ranks on the promise of easy conquest. That promise now crumbled to dust beneath his clawed feet. Shunted to a backwater research outpost, he was tasked with a singular, almost insulting objective: develop a shield that could withstand a railgun strike. Time seemed to eat itself whilst Velrak endured his punishment. Prototypes were built, tested, and inevitably turned into smoldering craters by merciless technicians. Velrak grew haggard, haunted by the blinding flash, the droning whine, the unstoppable projectiles. He began to suspect the task was not merely difficult, but impossible. Kinetic energy was brutally simple, a fundamental force, unlike the elegant manipulation of electromagnetism upon which Gilles technology had been founded. And so, with growing dread, Commander Velrak came to a horrifying realization. Perhaps the humans, in their primitive focus on such monstrous weapons, had stumbled upon an uncomfortable universal truth. Sometimes the simplest, most brutal solution was also the most effective. Perhaps they were not barbarians. That label now seemed to rest uncomfortably upon the once mighty Gilles expansive compact. Decades slipped past, blurring the traumatic edges of the past. Commander Velrak, now frail and grayed, found himself the reluctant repository of a terrible secret. The Gilles' new doctrine of defense and consolidation had lulled them into a false sense of security. Yet he knew it was only a matter of time until another ambitious race, or perhaps even a splinter of his own people, stumbled upon a vulnerable world that happened to be under human protection. The old arrogance had faded, replaced by a gnawing paranoia in all but the youngest generations. The fear of the unseen railgun, of the unstoppable projectile, lingered beneath the surface of every strategic meeting, every shipyard requisition form. Gilles explorers scanned the stars not with dreams of expansion, but with the dread of finding a bulky gunmetal sentinel aimed squarely at them. The humans, in their obliviousness, continued to thrive. Their colony grew, transforming into a recognized, though isolated, outpost. Trade delegations from other, more cautious species arrived, bearing gifts of advanced technology in exchange for tales of the legendary railguns. None dared to encroach too closely, for the stories echoed down the years, gaining a mythic quality: the monstrous weapons, the laughing defenders. The alien ship punched through and through. Velrak, nearing the end of his lifespan, made a desperate decision. Using back channels and coded transmissions, he reached out to the human colony. The message was brief, devoid of titles or formalities.
You must warn the galaxy. Shield technology is useless against your weapons. Do not share your secrets. We made a terrible mistake, and others will too.
He received no response, doubted he ever would. It was not in the nature of humans to understand the fear they now held over an entire interstellar civilization. Perhaps they would brush it off as nonsense or assume a trick. Yet the message alone brought Velrak some measure of solace in his final days. When the end came, he passed away not as a proud commander, but as the harbinger of a chilling truth. The humans might never realize the profound shadow they cast upon the galaxy, nor how their mere existence had altered the course of history. Perhaps it was better that way. Let them remain the unassuming guardians, the quiet protectors with their impossibly powerful guns, and let the rest of the Gilles and any others who dared listen cower in the knowledge that sometimes the quietest voice carried the biggest threat. The galaxy turned as it always had. Empires expanded, ebbed, and crumbled into stardust. New technological marvels were unveiled, reshaping trade, communication, and the very fabric of galactic civilization. Even among the cautious zeal, an echo of their once conquest-driven nature began to resurface. Yet one thing remained constant. None dared set an uninvited foot upon a world bearing the unmistakable stamp of humanity. Lush worlds with the telltale sign of shielded orbital railgun arrays were simply avoided. Whispers of the unkillable species rippled through space lanes, spoken both in awe and lingering fear. Meanwhile, humanity expanded as humans always do. Additional colonies were established, trade routes bloomed, and a slow but undeniable respect began to spread for these unique and unexpectedly formidable beings. It wasn't the sleek starships or sophisticated energy manipulation that caught the galaxy's attention. It was the ungainly railguns, those planet-cracking behemoths that roared across the light years. Of course, there were those foolish enough to test the legend. Pirate raiders driven by desperation or greed would sometimes descend on a fresh, unprotected human outpost, and the outcome was always the same. The lumbering railgun turrets would awaken, their targeting solutions precise, their hypervelocity projectiles would roar into the void, and the raiders would cease to exist. In the corner of a bustling spaceport on a world far removed from the original human colony, a young Gilles officer listened intently as a grizzled human mercenary recounted such a tale over a glass of acrid liquor.
Dumb bastards thought we were easy pickings.
The merc chuckled, his voice still rough with the edge of combat.
Didn't even get a shot off before the railguns lit 'em up like fireworks on festival day.
The Gilles officer, a product of the new cautious generation, shuddered. He'd heard these stories before, of course, but there was something chilling in the merc's casual tone, the utter certainty. As the night wore on and the drinks flowed more readily, the merc leaned in with a conspiratorial whisper.
"I'll tell you something, friend," he slurred. "Those railguns ain't the worst thing those folks have hidden away. You see, once they figured out how to punch holes in starships, well, let's just say they got creative."
The Gilles officer did not inquire further. He didn't have to. The fear buried deep in the collective Gilles unconsciousness was enough. He finished his drink, paid his tab, and stepped out into the neon-bathed streets, casting a wary glance up at the star-strewn sky. Somewhere out there, the humans hummed along with their lives and their planet-killing weapons. For now, they were protectors, however unwitting. But the universe was a fickle mistress, and the officer couldn't shake the feeling that one day the guns might be turned outward, aimed not in defense, but towards a new horizon. And if that day ever came, the Gilles and the entirety of the galaxy could only hope they would be on the right side of the barrel.